Thought I'd jump on and do a quick video of the Super Cup fallout from Venice after Tottenham fumbled the chance to win a second European trophy in the space of just 4 months after throwing away a 2-goal lead in Udine against Paris Saint-Germain, who eventually won 4-3 on penalties. Obviously the first game of the Thomas Frank era, and all things considered, it was all rather positive really, because for the best part of 70 minutes, Tottenham actually outplayed Paris Saint-Germain. Thomas Frank switched to the back 3/5 system with 3 in midfield, 3 runners effectively, with Kudus supporting Richarlison in attack, and it proved to be somewhat of a masterstroke. It was the same system that Frank actually utilised during his first season in the Premier League with Brentford, when they had joy, when it was Brian Mbeumo playing off Ivan Toney. But this time it was Kudus, as I said, supporting Richarlison. A kind of dogged front line, but actually a partnership that worked rather well given the circumstances. Obviously PSG like to dominate possession, but Tottenham really disrupted them, and they really put in a shift in tough heat and conditions in Udine. I'm not sure you would have been able to sort of pick it up on the television, but it was really hot and humid, and Spurs got through an awful lot of work, and they were very effective from set pieces. Obviously there's a big focus really on that being an area that Frank wants to improve alongside his coaches, and they had great joy because both of their goals, I should say, came from dead balls, with Mickey van der Ven tapping in after João Palhinha's effort was tipped onto the crossbar, before Romero snuck in round the back from Pedro Porro's free kick to head home, although Chevalier, not sure that pronunciation's right, but should have done better. Of course, he's been brought in to replace Gianluigi Donnarumma. That decision looks rather, on the basis of last night, looks like a ballsy decision really from Luis Enrique, because Donnarumma is one of the best goalkeepers in world football, and I know, it's not his greatest asset in terms of playing out from the back with his feet, but to me the primary objective of a goalkeeper is to keep goals out, and he does that brilliantly, whereas it appears that it's a little bit of a downgrade as such with the new arrival, because he's not as good in terms of keeping shots out, while he may be better with his feet. But we'll have to see how that one plays out. But generally, as I was saying, real positives for Tottenham, and I was actually impressed with Thomas Frank in his press conference, because he didn't dwell too much on the fact that Spurs surrendered, because ultimately once that first goal went in from Lee Kang-in, you kind of felt that Spurs would definitely concede another, and it obviously did happen through Gonzalo Ramos. I think Spurs just ran out of legs ultimately, and PSG's quality and reserve in terms of their substitutions really swung the balance. But yeah, Thomas Frank wasn't too harsh on Tottenham in terms of scrutinising their collapse, and he doesn't feel there's a kind of mentality issue there. It's more just a case of they ran out of steam, and actually they went toe to toe with the European champions. I know Chelsea wiped the floor of them in the Club World Cup final, but for the best part of 60-70 minutes, as I said, Spurs were the better side. They were organised. The back three suits them brilliantly. I think Romero at the heart of that, with Danzo on the right and Mickey van der Ven on the left, is really good. I thought the wing-back system brought the best from Pedro Porro as well. Obviously going forward, he's a huge asset. He's got great delivery on him, and he's really motoring up the pitch. Kind of industrious midfield setup really, with Pape Sarr supporting João Palhinha and Rodrigo Bentancur. I would like to see Spurs bring in a bit more creativity. Obviously we'll get onto that, because it's definitely an area that they're trying to address in the forthcoming weeks before the end of the transfer window. But all the fundamentals are there really. There was a real spine and a template for these big matches that Spurs will play in the Premier League and Champions League this season when they come up against big name opposition. I think 3 at the back is something that's going to work for them. Obviously there are a few players that Spurs will look to reintegrate over the forthcoming weeks and months. Solanke was on the bench again last night. Brennan Johnson had no minutes. Frank confirmed that was a tactical decision. You've also got Dejan Kulusevski to come in. Matheus Tel, a tough night for him after missing the penalty, came on late in the second half, and unfortunately has been subject to racial abuse in the aftermath of the defeat, which Spurs have strongly condemned, labelling the perpetrators as cowards that sort of sit behind anonymous accounts on social media, which is 100% a fair reflection. Obviously, there's no room for that kind of abuse whatsoever in any walk of life, so it's a real shame to see Tell on the receiving end of those kind of messages. He's a young player that requires patience, but he's a good prospect. Problem is, Spurs have got a lot of competition in attacking places, and it looks like they're going to try and bring a few players in before the deadline at the very least. I thought João Palhinha added some much needed steel into Spurs' midfield ranks, while Kudus really showcased he's a wiry kind of attacker with his dribbling. He can get about the pitch in the final third and drive the team on. He's strong. He had a really good battle with Nuno Mendes, but we were actually speaking to him after the game, and you can catch some reaction from João Palhinha and Mohamed Kudus on the Mirror website. But Kudus was asked by myself whether or where he prefers to feature, and he said on the right or as a number 10, and he was kind of operating as a second striker or a shadow striker, so to speak, behind Richarlison, but it was a role carried out rather well. I think he's got the grit and the physical attributes to accompany his technical qualities to be a real great signing for Spurs. But I still think they need a bit more quality in attack in terms of bringing in a couple new faces that can add a few more goals to the team. So the two players that the club have identified as primary targets at this stage are Manchester City's Savinho and Eberechi Eze. Now, I was actually sat near Fabio Paratici and Johan Langer last night. They were both in the stand. Obviously, Daniel Levy was in America moving his daughter into university, but Paratici was on his phone at half-time, as he usually does, making those calls. He's still involved on a consultancy basis with Spurs, but he's expected or decisions expected on his future at the end of the transfer window, when I believe his consultancy period expires. But on Savinho, it's believed that a formal approach has been knocked back by City, but the player does appear to be open to the move. I think because the fact regular game time is probably on offer at Spurs, where at Manchester City there's a lot of competition for places. You've got Jeremy Doku, Phil Foden, Omar Marmoush, Ryan Cherky, couple other players, Oscar Bob as well. So Savinho could really receive assurances of game time at Spurs. I think the initial approach was around about the £45 million mark, but neither Man City or Spurs shooting this down at this stage and categorically saying that the deal is no longer on the cards, because there was suggestions that City weren't willing to do business. But I think the conversations are continuing, and I'm expecting Spurs to maybe try again, because 45 million is probably a little bit below market value for Savinho. Yes, his numbers aren't great, but I think the potential's there for all to see. He's a really great talent, can play on either flank, got a tremendous natural skill, can cross, can score, can assist. So I do expect that not to be the last of it, really, where Savinho's concerned. As for Eze, again, there is this scepticism as to whether his release clause has expired, but it does appear like Spurs are now going to make a formal approach to Palace. Whether a deal can be agreed, that's another question altogether, because I think it will be really difficult, as I mentioned in my last video, because Palace at this stage of the window really don't want to weaken their squad, given they've just been demoted to the Conference League. Eze is a player that probably would look to move on, given that he's won the FA Cup with Palace, and he's 27 now, so he's not going to have too many more years left to try and play Champions League football. So I think this is the right chance for him to move. It's just a question of price. I think Spurs are prepared to go strong. They've got the cash to hand. We saw that with the Morgan Gibbs-White deal that was effectively appeared imminent at one stage when they put that £60 million on the table. So they've got that kind of money to play with. It's just a case of whether Palace dig their heels into the ground, because I think they would try to make it difficult for Tottenham at least to sanction or strike a deal, this late in the transfer window. But movement on both of those fronts. There are a few other players that Tottenham have looked at, but I think at this stage those two are the primary targets. In terms of outgoings, I think Spurs will look to move a couple more players on, probably use Basuma, obviously into the last year of his contract, was left at home due to disciplinary issues and persistent lateness. Brian Hill was another one. As I reported last weekend, Bologna are a team that have held discussions over a deal for him. There's a few more loans we could see happen as well, the likes of Luka Vuskovic. Hamburg in discussions to sign him. But all in all, Frank appears to be happy with his squad. He made it clear that he was happy, but he would like to still bring in a couple more players, and now it's down to Tottenham to execute those deals. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll be back again with some more transfer news and videos very soon.